Our next guest was a keynote speaker at the Harvard Women in Business 2018 conference and named the #1 female entrepreneur to watch by CIO magazine in 2018.
She has quite a resume. Iman Oubou, is that how you say it?
Oubou.
Oubou. Iman Oubou, founder and CEO of SWAAY Media, an online publishing platform where like-minded women share and consume thoughtful content. So get this, she's Miss New York US in 2015. Then a year later, she launched this company, SWAAY Media. So why'd you give up the glamour for entrepreneurship?
It was never really a glamorous life, to be honest with you. It was a lot of work, actually, especially balancing my biotech corporate life at the time and then also doing the Miss New York appearances and charity work during the weekend. So I took on a lot more than I could handle. But ultimately, it was definitely a good experience that I think taught me a lot about my purpose, which is, again, helping women to find a platform to have their voices heard. And I don't think that if I didn't go the route of, pageantry, I wouldn't have probably really discovered that for myself. So it really was accidental. When I won Miss New York US, I decided to use my platform for good and be a change agent in the community. So I launched a podcast called Entrepreneurs in Vogue in 2015, literally a day after I won. And that ultimately is what turned into what is today SWAAY. So it really was an expansion of the interviews and the stories I told during the podcast and finding these women that really led unconventional paths to success and telling those stories because I felt like they were undercovered in the media.
Wow.
Well, you're now in the works of a relaunch. What should users expect from your SWAAY 2.0?
Well, it's exciting, but stressful, to say the least. So we really wanted to take a step back last year and figure out not to just how to be a content provider, but rather how do we provide a platform that's more interactive for professional women to not only be inspired through long-form content and storytelling, but also be able to connect with each other. We decided to go this route because we took some time to look at the feedback and the data analytics and what performed really well for us over the past 3 years. And it seemed like our best performing pieces have been op-eds and stories that came from women themselves and were told in personal accounts. And that's normal because a lot of women now want to feel related and resonate with other women's stories so they feel like they're not alone in their journey, wherever that may be. And then the other thing is a lot of the questions and feedback was, I have a story, how can I automatically submit it for SWAAY to be published? Basically, I have a lot to say, I have a lot of opinions, where can I contribute that content? And I think that really made us realize that yes, women are looking for better and smarter content, but also a platform where they can actually be part of that conversation and lend their voice to really be part of those meaningful, thought-provoking issues that I think we're all talking about in this women's movement right now.
Well, we're storytellers. That's what we are as humans. And if you don't tell stories, you're never going to get your point across.
Exactly.
So speaking of that, before I get into all these specifics, tell us your story. Where you're from, how'd you end up here? Yeah. Evidently, Miss New York was in the cards for you. How'd that work out?
Well, so I was born in Morocco and I was raised in Colorado. And I actually wanted to be a doctor, specifically an oncologist. I really had a dream of, finding cure to cancer one day. And so that's really the route that I pursued. So I went to school for biochemistry and molecular biology.
Wow, beauty and brains.
And then in Colorado. And then my mom.
CU Boulder?
CU Denver.
Okay.
For grad school, and then CSU for.
Okay. I'm Regis. I'm from Colorado as well. Awesome. So yes.
One of our producers is a CSU grad, so there's a lot represented.
Colorado's in the house today.
Family. I love it. And so after that, I went to intern in Germany for a biotech startup out there, and when I came back, my mother actually signed me up for my very first pageant.
Really?
So I started pretty late. I started at 22, which is not.
Oh my God! They must have wanted to scratch your eyes out. This girl just drops out of the sky and she wins the pageant.
And I really loved and fell in love with the process and how much self-awareness I gained from it. It wasn't even about winning, even though I was very competitive. But to me, the process of preparing for a pageant really was something that I took to heart, and I think it really challenged me as a woman, and it challenged me to really discover who I was and what I wanted to use my platform, whatever title I would win, and how I could really make that impact, not just pursue a career, but rather, is it a purpose, is it a calling? So I was always kind of focused on that, because I also think that a lot of the skills that they don't teach you in school, especially in business school, have been taught to me by my pageant coach. Because think about it, you have 2 minutes to impress a judge. And by
That's pitching.
2 minutes to tell your story, 2 minutes to tell them why you're the best woman among 50 women, awesome women.
And you got to look good while you're doing it, right?
You gotta
All
connect.
around, the whole package. You got to sell it, sell it. And if I didn't go through that training, I don't think I would be the businesswoman I am today. I feel like that experience really brought out the businesswoman in me, because I had never thought in my life I would be an entrepreneur. I actually didn't think business.
It's really a lot of branding yourself and
Yeah.
marketing yourself and really understanding where that thread is internally to what you want to then give back to the world. And so the name Sway gets me thinking. You want to help women, and you found this thread internally through the pageantry circuit. Is it about swaying women to find that internal thread for themselves?
That's actually a good one. But the way we approach it is more swaying the narrative for women.
Okay.
So changing really the narrative, because as women, I think for the most part, most of the media and content we've been consuming has been focused on fashion, beauty, lifestyle. So very much soft lifestyle, sometimes fluffy topics. And if we really want to change the narrative about how we are perceived in, society, and just really challenging the status quo and the gender norms and gender roles, we really need to start consuming better content ourselves, but also be and insist on having our voices heard within some of the most important and pressing issues in today's society. So just examples, like for example, during the US election in 2016, 80% of statements made about abortion came from men. And to me, that just didn't really sit well with me, although I know they're concerned to a certain extent, but why don't we celebrate female voices when it comes to issues that affect us every day? Why aren't we talking about certain issues from women's perspectives? And so that's really what the driver behind SWAAY 2.0 is. Yes, we're a media company, but we're not only just here to tell you how to think and what to do. We want to give you that platform for you to be part of that conversation and lend your voice to inspire other women too. So it's a conversation between all of us versus us being a media company and editors behind their computers figuring out what they want to talk about, but rather invite you to be part of that conversation and create content based on what you want to know and how you want to feel.
So, Iman, I have a question that maybe isn't even appropriate in today's world, but I'm morbidly curious here. When you are a beauty pageant person, you're obviously good looking, right? Does that make it more difficult to have credibility sometimes in a certain space? We look the way we look, right? And whether it's positive or negative, it isn't currency in all spaces. Beauty probably doesn't help you in an entrepreneurial space, does it?
It didn't in my experience at the beginning, maybe because I was also worried about that same exact issue. And I think especially when I first took on, meetings with investors that were a bit more traditional, older, so they were not used to kind of seeing all these young women coming in and pitching, especially when you have Miss New York in your resume.
That's my question. It's distracting. I'm like...
And then I would get comments like, well, why do you want to start a business? Why don't you just use your face to endorse beauty products? Or I even met with a marketing agency that said, why do you need to go waste your time in rebranding a whole company while you can just use your own social media to talk about it? Because people like to watch pretty girls talk. And this is the kind of comments I wasn't even prepared for this. I'm like, yes, I hear about the whole sexism happening, but I'm like, it cannot be happening in 2016. Well, not 2019, but at the time, I'm like, I'm sure the world has evolved. No one will tell me that to my face, but I was so wrong about it. And I think that made me even more passionate about what I do, because it's ironic. I'm over here pitching a media company and a brand that is actually meant to change the narrative for women because of the whole being painted into buckets. Media is like, if you're a pretty woman, you're a model, actress, sexy, that's all you are. But then if you're a scientist, and I was both, then you must not be very sexy or
Not pretty, yes. Your brains or your beauty. They don't
Big
really...
bubble one in, yeah.
I would go to events, I remember, as Miss New York, and people were like, what is your career? What do you do? And I said, I'm actually a cancer research scientist. And they look at me like, what? You mean you're not like a model? Or no, but it was interesting, because now I think the beauty pageant world has completely changed, and we have a lot more career-driven doctors, women, lawyers, all of them are like really now into the pageant world, which is great because it helps my case too. Like, you can be both smart and beautiful. But I think before that, beauty pageants have always been known to be more shallow and focused on beauty, which is not the case anymore.
Well, this is wonderful because what you're doing is you're breaking down bias. And that's really what we have. We have a bias that if someone is attractive and someone's been in the pageant world, that they couldn't possibly be an entrepreneur. They couldn't possibly have the brains for business. And you're changing that bias in a very positive way. I'm curious if you were influenced by Huffington Post, Thrive Global, those platforms where it's more, there are many entrepreneurs and many voices and people can kind of share online. Did that have an impact?
I think to a certain extent. I definitely have always been a fan of Arianna Huffington and what she's done with the platform, and I think she has the right idea too. She wants people to be part of the conversation. Definitely has been a model that we've been looking at closely. I know they don't do membership based, so
Correct.
we are focused on curating the conversation because
okay.
it can get very, sidetracked. You can allow the trolls.
Do people have more engagement when it is a membership community because they have skin in the game, right? They're paying for this.
They see the value. They feel like they're invested in the brand as well. And also it creates the conversation because someone who's not really serious about bringing value or taking part in something, that brings value to them, they're not going to pay something every month to just troll people. So that's the issue with Twitter, is that if I voice my opinion on Twitter, I get all these attacks and judgments and whatnot. And that's again why I think women are very reluctant to have their voices heard, is because they don't want to be judged. They don't feel safe. Especially when it comes to hard-hitting topics. They don't want to really say, okay, I'm pro-choice or anti-choice or any of that sort, because they're like, okay, I don't want to be judged. But I think if you offer them a safer space where it's more about the conversation rather attacking each other's opinions, they're more open to it. And that's what we've seen over the past, even though we were not membership based before, but we saw that we could be, because the women that come to our brand and our platform really care about the conversation, really care about the stories they want to tell and the stories they want to hear. So it makes more sense for us too from a business model, because we never really were ad driven. And I think being ad-driven media really compromises the content, because you basically have to create content that caters to advertisers, and now you're playing the clickbait game, which I never really wanted to go into media for that. I don't have a background in media, so I feel like I'm also I'm excited to do things differently. And I think a lot of other media brands are still kind of trying to stay in the old model way of doing things based on advertising, and that's really what worked before. But not every media company can be successful with membership, because you have to have a very niche and target audience to make that work.
Well, Iman, you've been a fabulous guest. In fact, our co-anchor wrote in, who Holland's filling in for, and said, you're inspiring and you're doing a great job. So everyone's happy here.
Okay.
Thank
and
you
if
so
we
much.
get Lindsay's seal of approval, we know we've done well. So thank you for
We'll say hi
joining
to
us.
her.
Yes,
Miss
thank
her.
you.